Okay. Can I start?
Okay, you can start.
Before beginning, I would like to offer my prayers. Madhyana Pimaranda Swarnana Janashila Kaya Chakshi Indvitanina Tasma Shri Gurave Nama Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Sapitanina Bripade Swayam Rupa Kadamayan Dadanti Subhadantika Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yudapada Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavansja Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Tam Swajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanitanscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarupyasya Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasavi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Yes, So today we'll be dealing with the next verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, that is 1.9.30. The shloka goes as follows. Tadopasamridhaya griha सहस्त्रानिर् विमुक्त संगम मन आदि पुरुषे कृष्णे लस्त पीत पते चतुर्भुजे पुराह स्थिते अमलित दृक् वैद्रयात्. So, word to word meaning, translation, and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, word to word meaning goes as that at that time, Upasamridhai is withdrawing, Griha, speech, Sahasranir Bhishma Dev, who was expert in thousands of sciences and arts, Vimukta Sangha, completely freed from everything else, Manaha, mind, Adi Purushe, unto the original personality of Godhead, Krishna, unto Krishna, Lastapitapate, decorated with yellow garments, Chaturbhuje, unto the four-handed original Narayana, Puraha, just before, Stithe, standing, Amalita, widespread, Drik, vision, Vaidrayat, fixed. Translation. Thereupon, the man who spoke on different subjects with thousands of meanings and who fought on thousands of battlefields and protected thousands of men stopped speaking and being completely freed from all bondage, withdrew his mind from everything else and fixed his wide open eyes upon the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who stood before him four-handed, dressed in yellow garments that glittered and shined. So the purport is a big one, wherein Srila Prabhupada is giving references from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So maybe we can go para by para and understand it. So purport goes as, in the momentous hour of living his material body, Bhishma Dev sets glorious example concerning the important function of the human form of life. The subject matter which attracts the dying man becomes the beginning of his next life. Therefore, if one is absorbed in the thoughts of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, he's sure to go back to Godhead without any doubt. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 8.5 to 8.15. These are the references from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. 5, it goes as any and however whoever at the time of death quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature of this, there is no doubt. 6, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. 7, therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting with your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me. You will attain me without doubt. 8, he who meditates on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path. He, O Partha, Arjuna, is sure to reach me. 9, one should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, and he who is the oldest, who is the controller, who is the smaller than the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, who is always a person. He is luminous like sun, and being transcendental is beyond this material nature. 10, one who at the time of death fixes his life there between the eyebrows in full devotion, engages himself remembering the Supreme Lord, will certainly attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 11, persons learned in Vedas who utter Omkara and who are great sages in the renounced order enter into Brahman. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy. I shall now explain to you the process by which one can attain salvation. The yogic situation is that of detachment from all sensual engagements, closing all doors of senses, and fixing the mind and on the heart, mind on the heart, and the life air at the top of the head. One establishes himself in the yoga. After 13, after being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and puts his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planets. 14, for one who surrenders remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Pritha, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. 15, after attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. Shri Bhishma Deva attained the perfection of quitting his body, the will, and was fortunate enough to have Lord Krishna, the object of his attention, personally present at the time of death. He therefore fixed his eyes open upon him. He wanted to see Sri Krishna for a long time out of his spontaneous love for him, because he is a pure devotee. He had had very little to do with the detailed performance of yogic principles. Simple bhakti yoga is enough to bring about perfection. Therefore, the ardent desire of Bhishma Dev was to see this person of Lord Krishna, the most lovable object, and by the grace of Lord Shri Bhishma Dev had the opportunity at the last stage of his breathing. So, Hare Krishna. So, in today's verse, we can see as to how Bhishma Dev is all ready to quit his body. So in the previous verses, we were seeing how Bhishma Dev, being on the bed of arrows, he was giving various instructions to King Yudhishthir Maharaj regarding various aspects as to how to govern the kingdom. And he was also pacifying Yudhishthir Maharaj, because Yudhishthir Maharaj thought that the entire war of Kurukshetra had happened because of him. So he was pacifying Yudhishthir Maharaj, giving him you know various instructions to run the kingdom successfully. And after all this, Bhishma Dev, we know that Bhishma Dev had got this boon from his father, that Icha Maran, so that is he can quit his body whenever he desires to do so. So now Bhishma Dev has decided that he has to quit his body, and he was waiting for Uttarayana. So, Srila Prabhupada in Bhagavad Gita, also there is a reference wherein in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives 4 specific times, and in these 4 specific times, if anybody is quitting their body, then in that case, they're going to get a higher destination, that the soul is going to get a higher destination. And one of the time one of the time period mentioned by Srila Prabhupada is Uttarayana. So we can see as to how Bhishma Dev was waiting for Uttarayana on that bed of arrows. He's been waiting and for Uttarayana to come so that he can quit his body. So now we can see as to how Prabhupada in the translation, he is writing that thereupon the man who spoke on different subject matter with thousands of meanings, and who fought on thousands of battlefields and protected thousands of men, stopped speaking, and being completely freed from all bondage, withdrew his mind from everything else, and fixed his wide open eyes upon the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So we can see that how Prabhupada is emphasizing that Bhishma Dev, even though he was, giving various instructions to Yudhishthir Maharaj, now he stopped speaking. He withdrew all the senses, and he's focusing all the senses on the Supreme. He's engaging all the senses in the service of the Supreme Lord. And in this way, by remembering the Supreme Lord, Bhishma Dev has decided to quit his body. So on the same verse, our Guru Maharaj had given a lecture. In that, Guru Maharaj was mentioning that when we had all this when the COVID period was going on in India, and not only in India, in the entire world, we could see how many people were quitting their body because of the virus and everything. People were quitting their body, and it was so difficult for the family members to just digest the fact that this particular member in the family is dead now. So Guru Maharaj tells, so why is it that it is so difficult for us to quit our bodies? Why is it that death is so fearful for us? Guru Maharaj tells that it is because we forget that we are not the body and we are the spirit soul. Because we are identifying ourselves with the body, because we have forgotten that our constitutional position is to be the servant of the Supreme Lord and render devotional service to him, this has created an illusion. And because we are identifying ourselves with the body, it becomes difficult for us to quit the body, and thereby we become fearful of this entire cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. So Guru Maharaj was so nicely mentioning that only when we come out of this concept that I am not this body and I am the soul, and when we are out of the illusion, quitting the body becomes easier. So we have always heard as to how ISKCON teaches us. ISKCON is the only institution that teaches us not only the art of living but also the art of dying. All these scriptures, that is Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, it could be Chaitanya Charitamrita, and all the books that Srila Prabhupada has written, it is not only about, how to live our lives in this material world, but there are various examples in this pages of Srimad Bhagavatam where the devotees have quit their body, remembering the Supreme Lord. Their thought is the art of quitting. And in fact, and one of them is our Mahajan, Bhishma Dev. So here, even in the purport, Prabhupada writes that Bhishma Dev sets the glorious example concerning the important function of human form of life. So it could be so, confusing for us to understand what is this important function of human life is quitting the body, because Prabhupada writes that when a man this lifetime this the way the soul leaves the body, or what a person is thinking when he's quitting his body, what is he meditating upon, is going to decide his next life. That is what Srila Prabhupada is writing here. He writes that the subject matter of which attracts the dying man becomes the beginning of his next life. So indirectly, Srila Prabhupada is telling that we are preparing for our next birth in the current body that we are given in. That is, we are preparing for our next life. So what all we do in this present life is going to determine what form of body are we going to get in the next birth. So here Bhishma Dev is teaching us the art as to how one should, quit his body. And we can also see various examples. It could be Parikshit Maharaj, and it could be Dhruva Maharaj, and it could be our own Srila Prabhupada. They are set such beautiful and wonderful standards as to how a devotee has to quit his body. So I was hearing this from a lecture where one of the Prabhuji's, a senior Vaishnava, he was mentioning when this COVID-19 period was going on in the entire world, people were in this notion that if they are taken the vaccine, if vaccine was injected to their body, then they would be all safe. So they're thinking that that small vaccine could save the life. But we have also seen the instances wherein people had, vaccinated themselves, and they still had to, get infected by the virus and quit their body. So the point I'm trying to make is that the small vaccine is not going. It was not the fear of getting the virus attacked, because they knew that if the virus is going to get into the body, the probability of them dying is higher. So they were fearful of death. So we can all see as to how even it could be even me, when before coming into Krishna consciousness, even I was fearful about death. But we can see as to how the devotees of the Lord, even they see the death as an opportunity to go back home, back to Godhead, and serve the Supreme Lord. Even there, they're thinking as to how can they render service to the Supreme Lord. So it is because of Srila Prabhupada that we get a different perspective of, quitting the body. And Srila Prabhupada said that, if anybody reads his books, that is Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, then they are no longer fearful of death. They can, overcome that fear of death, and they can reconnect their lost relationship with the Supreme Lord and go back home, back to God. So it is only Srila Prabhupada who can, make us come out of this fear of death. By when we read the scriptures, we come to know as to how the devotees have quit their body, and how quitting body and how even death can, help. Death is an opportunity for us to go back to our Supreme Father. So here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada has made beautiful references from Bhagavad Gita, starting from 5th verse, chapter 8, 5th verse to 15th verse. So I will just, because of the time constraint, we can just see the main points. So first one is that Prabhupada writes, whoever remembers Krishna at the time of death, there is no doubt that they're going to attain me. So Krishna is telling that anybody who is remembering him at the time of quitting his body, he's going to attain Krishna. So here we know, we have to remember Krishna at the time. If we remember Krishna at the time of death, then we are surely going to reach the supreme abode of the Lord. But how do we do it? So it is said that there was a study done by a group of scientists, and they came to a conclusion that when the soul is leaving the body, or when a man is dying, and that point of time, it is said that the Supreme Lord, within that 7 seconds, he rewinds the entire, he gives the entire picture of what this Jivatma has done throughout his life. So if one is engaged in sense gratification in their entire lifetime, so at the time of death, it is common for somebody to remember the same. So, for example, if I am engaged in some other activity, always engaged in sense gratification, so it is automatically that at the end of my life, I'm going to remember the same thing. So, how do we remember Krishna at the end of our lifetime? Is when we are engaged in his devotional service throughout our lives. So it is and how do we remember Krishna throughout our life is by engaging ourselves in devotional service and getting devotees association. Because in Srimad Bhagavad Gita itself, there is a verse wherein Krishna tells that Machita Madgata Prana Bodhayanta Paraspara Katayantas Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Cha Ramanti Cha. So when my devotees come together, then they speak only about me. They glorify me. So their entire the center of the topic when we meet devotees is Krishna. So when we are associated with Krishna, the devotees of the Lord. So even though we may forget to remember Krishna, but the devotees of the Lord will help us to remind us of the Supreme Lord. So that is how when we are engaged in devotional service throughout our life, so we have to all be thankful to Srila Prabhupada, because he has, given us such a beautiful schedule. So wherein from the moment we wake up to the minute we go to bed, every minute Srila Prabhupada has taught us to remember Krishna. So it could be our morning program, and then after that, even when we are he's brought in this
Hare Krishna, what happened? Can you all able to hear? There was a break. Continue, Mataji.
Only when at the time of death we are going to remember Krishna. So we can understand this by a small analogy. So we all have been students, and some of us are still studying. So each class, that is, it could be class 1 to class 10, each class, it would be for about the time period for each standard that we study could be 1 year. So, and we are going to write our final exams only at the year end. But throughout the entire time period, we could see that we were giving multiple tests, we were continuously studying, and we were making sure that in case we score less, we come back home and check in what we have done wrong, so that the next exam we correct ourselves. So the entire preparation that we do is to attend the final exam, so that we get good marks or we score good in our final examination. So similar is the life of a devotee or life of any person. So the entire lifetime we are all preparing. There are various difficulties, and there are various struggles. Even in the bhakti life, sometimes the bhakti life is really smooth, and sometimes there are so many obstacles. But in spite of all these, when we are trying to, stay connected to Krishna, hold on to the hands of Krishna, and not move away from Krishna. And all this will count at the time of death. All this will help us remember Krishna at the time of death. So, and even Prabhupada writes that whatever state one remembers at the time of quitting his body, he's going to attain the same. So this is such a statement. It is like, giving us a caution. It's a disclaimer that if you remember, whatever you remember, you're going to attain that state. So for this we can see the example of Bharat Maharaj, as to how Bharat Maharaj, he was such an exalted devotee. He finished all the duties of a king, and he went to the forest and he started meditating upon, and that's when he saw a baby deer who came in form of, who was a form of Maya. And he fell in trap of that baby deer. He started taking care of that baby deer and everything. And when it was his time to quit his body, we can see as to how Bharat Maharaj, remembered the deer. And because he remembered the deer, he became a deer in his next life. And it was all a different thing as to how, Bharat Maharaj, even though he was in the body of the deer, by the mercy of the Lord, he could get what he could remember that he was a devotee in the previous life, and he had performed devotional service. And he after that he took the form of Jada Bharat, and he became serious in his devotional service, and then he went back to Godhead. So because Bharat Maharaj was such an exalted devotee, and he was he fell into trap of that small baby deer, and he got in his next life he became a deer. So because he was in remembering that baby deer, he also got that form of that baby deer. Okay, so so it is very important as to what we remember. And there is also another instance where we have already discussed it. We have, you could have all discussed it in your Bhakti Vriksha also, as to how there is a merchant, a rich merchant, who is running his business, and he's on the deathbed. And he has 3 4 sons, and he's calling each one by their name, and he's asking whether this person is present, whether my first son is present, whether my second son is present, and my third son is present, my fourth son is present in the room. And when he comes to know all his family members are there, and because he's quitting his body at that minute, all wants to look at that person who is on the deathbed. This merchant, he's also worried that who's going to look at the shop. So even at that point when he's quitting his body, he's so much conscious about what if somebody comes and steals away the stock that is being kept in the stock, because in this entire lifetime he's being attached with the shop, and he's very concerned about the profits that is there in the shop. Because of this, we can see that when he quit his body, he becomes a rat or a lizard in the same shop, because he's so much attached, and he's in the same consciousness. So when he's quitting his body, he's thinking about the shop. So he turns to and at the end of his lifetime, he ends up in the same shop being some insect. So Bhishma Dev is again showing us how important it is to remember Krishna. So it is said that he was waiting for Uttarayana. So Uttarayana means the upward movement of sun. And if it is taken in the male sense, because Sanskrit is such a beautiful language, and if it is taken as Uttara Narayan, then it is told that Uttarayana, Ayana means to take shelter. So one of the meaning is the upward movement of sun, and it, as I mentioned, that it is an auspicious time for anybody to quit his body. And the other meaning of Uttarayana is Ayana means to take shelter, and Uttara means the lady. So the lady's shelter whom even Krishna had taken. So we can see as to how when Parikshit Maharaj was in the womb of Uttara, Krishna had become as small as the size of thumb to protect Parikshit Maharaj. So even the person who has taken the shelter of the womb of Uttara, that is none other than the Krishna himself. So indirectly, Amarendra Prabhu was mentioning to the upfront, it looks like he's waiting for the auspicious time of Uttarayan. But when you go deep into the meaning, he was waiting for Krishna, who took the shelter of Lady Uttara. So, indirectly, it is seen that Bhishma Dev was waiting for the Supreme Lord Krishna to come so that he can fix all his senses on the Supreme Lord, and in that way he can quit his body, setting an example as to how glorious the death of the devotee can be. And in this instance, I remember Guru Maharaj was mentioning about Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. So when Bhakti Swami Maharaj, he had quit his body, his death was, Guru Maharaj was mentioning that he had such a glorious death. You know, Harinam Sankirtan was going on one side, and Guru Maharaj told that when Bhakti Swami Maharaj has left, had quit his body, all the tulsi was kept on his body, and the Bhakti Swami Maharaj, because it is a sign of auspiciousness. Guru Maharaj was mentioning when tulsi is being kept, and when in this way body is being cremated, it is sign that the body is going back home, back to Godhead. And Guru Maharaj was mentioning that it is very important to sprinkle Ganga on the forehead when the body when the person has quit his body. One has to sprinkle Ganga on the forehead, place tulsi leaves or tulsi twigs at the time of cremation, and one has to circumambulate the body of the devotee, because they are auspicious. And in the same lecture, Guru Maharaj was mentioning that it is not only about remembering the Supreme Lord. Even when the devotees remember when devotees, if they are unable to remember the Supreme Lord, but in case they are able to remember the glorious devotees of the Lord, even in that case, they are going to go back home, back to Godhead. Because, sometimes it so happens that we may fail to remember the Supreme Lord. But in case, even if we are able to remember the devotees of the Supreme Lord, Guru Maharaj said that they will go back home, back to Godhead. And for this, Guru Maharaj gave an example from Chaitanya Leela, wherein he stated that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had mentioned that if anybody who remembers Sachi Mata, then even though they've accumulated, n number of sins in their past lifetimes, and even though they've committed the most sinful activity, anybody who remembers Sachi Mata, all their sinful activities would be nullified, and at the time of death he would attain the supreme Lord. So that is how Guru Maharaj was mentioning how glorious devotees are. Even if the devotees are remembered, they can even if the devotees remember such exalted devotees like our Mahajans, and as the Guru Maharaj mentioned Sachi Mata, then they would go back home, back to Godhead. So once Srila Prabhupada, one of the Matajis, asked Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I have never seen Krishna. I could be chanting the holy name of the Lord. I could see Krishna present in form of Acha Vigraha in the temple. I have never seen Krishna, Prabhupada, but because of that I may not be able to remember Krishna, but I've seen you. I have got your association. So if I remember you, can I go back at the time of my death? Will I go back to Godhead? She asked Prabhupada. This Mataji asked Prabhupada. So Prabhupada was silent for a minute. and he was thinking, and then he told that if you remember me, you will surely go back home, back to Godhead. In case you're not able to remember Krishna and you remember Srila Prabhupada, you're going to go back to Godhead, because Guru Maharaj mentioned that not only name, form, and pastimes of the Lord are non-different, even devotees of the Lord are non-different from the Lord himself, because these are the wonderful devotees who are going to make us remember Krishna at the time of our death. Because we could have had all the relation, we could have so many relatives, we could have had wealth, we could have many things, a wealth status in the society, but none of this can help us reach the Supreme Lord except the devotees of the Lord. Guru Maharaj was mentioning, and um, it is also said that okay, in the entire lifetime I can remember Krishna. So what do I do? Because when I sleep, we have seen many instances wherein devotees have slept and the next morning it has happened that they've quit their body. So Prabhupada always emphasized that we have to read Krishna book before going to bed. Prabhupada himself made this practice of having a glass of milk at the night and reading a Krishna book, and he also recommended that all the devotees do the same. So Prabhupada mentioned that when devotees read Krishna book and go to sleep, go to bed, so they get, these pastimes will start reflecting. They get the dreams of these pastimes. And not these any kind of mundane dreams, all these pastimes that they would have read in Krishna book, it keeps on coming. They can remember the pastimes, and those pastimes, it may happen that those pastimes can even come as dream to the devotees. So in this way, when they're going to bed, they can read Krishna book, and they can remember Krishna even before going to bed. So Srila Prabhupada has designed this entire schedule in such a way that every minute we can think about Krishna. And even when we read the scriptures, it not only teaches us how to quit the body. When even we are leaving our lives in this material world, it tells us how we can remember Krishna and perform our duties. That is what even in one of the purports, it has been one of the reference where Srila Prabhupada has given it. It has been mentioned that one has to remember Krishna and perform their duties or the task that is being assigned to them in the material world. That is the prescribed duty. It was referred to Arjuna, wherein Krishna tells you have to carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. So it is not that you remember Krishna and not perform your prescribed duties. No, Krishna is never mentioning that, because Krishna himself is advising Arjuna to perform the prescribed duty, that is his duty of fighting, and indirectly telling us that you perform your prescribed duties, but keeping Krishna in the center. So all that Prabhupada is telling is that centralizing Krishna. So when we do that, when we do this activity of centralizing Krishna in our life, when we are all fit and fine, and then we can remember Krishna at the time of quitting our body. Guru Maharaj, he mentions so nicely that if Arjuna could remember Krishna in the battlefield, if Bhishma Dev, who was lying on the bed of arrows, it is said that there were so many arrows that was pierced into Bhishma Dev's body that there was no space to even drop a needle. That is the pain Bhishma Dev was going through. In spite of this, they were able to remember Krishna. It is because Bhishma Dev, in his entire lifetime, he was always in the mood of rendering devotional service to the Supreme Lord. So that becomes so important that we engage our senses in the service of the Supreme Lord when we are all fit and fine. So I will just conclude by giving this reference. So wherein it is being mentioned that what if one is unable to, so we all know that we have to remember Krishna at the time of death and everything, because it is being even mentioned in the verse that whatever we remember at the time of death, we are going to attain the same. But sometimes there would be so many bodily complexities that could be going on, and because of that, the devotees are unable to remember Krishna. So what does Krishna tell? Krishna tells, Yadi vatedi doshena mad bhakto माम न चात स्मरेत अहम स्मरामि मद भक्ता नयामि प्रमम गतिम. If my devotee is unable to remember me at the time of death because of disturbance felt within the body at that time, then I shall remember my devotee and take him back home, take him back to my supreme abode. So we can see as to how the Supreme Lord never forgets what we have done, and he remembers all the devotional service that we had performed for him. And he promises that if my devotee is unable to remember me because of some bodily complications, then I will remember my devotee and I will make sure that I personally come and take him back home, back to Godhead. So similarly, in case of Bhishma Dev, that Bhishma Dev had this desire that he has to see the Supreme Lord at the time of his death. Even he had this boon of Icha Maran, and he had this desire of seeing the Supreme Lord at the time of his death. And Supreme Lord, he knew how Bhishma Dev, had each and every moment of his life, he has always served the Supreme Lord. For people externally, it could be felt that Bhishma Dev is on the opposite party with Kauravas, and he's against Pandavas. But Krishna knew that Bhishma Dev was doing it for the pleasure of the Lord, because it could bring satisfaction and it could please the Supreme Lord. Bhishma Dev was on the opposite side, and in that way Bhishma Dev was rendering service. And at the end, what happened? Krishna himself came to send off Bhishma Dev. He stood in front of Bhishma Dev for such a long time, and looking at such effulgent form of the Supreme Lord, Bhishma Dev left his body. And finally, there are various instances in the scriptures wherein the Supreme Lord is not only stating that I will come and take you back home, back to Godhead, but Supreme Lord has done it. We can see in the scriptures in Ramayana, wherein Jatayu, at that old age, he was rendering service through the form being in the body of a bird. He was rendering service to protect Mother Sita. And the Supreme Lord has a honor, as a gratitude to Jatayu, he himself performed the Shraddha ceremony. So we can see that only a son can perform the Shraddha ceremony for his parents. So in this way, Lord Ram had performed Shraddha ceremony of Jatayu. And even in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we can see as to how Haridas Thakur, he was, chanting 3 lakh names of the Supreme Lord. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, himself lifted Haridas Thakur, and he performed the final rites for Haridas Thakur. And Guru Maharaj was mentioning as to how Bhishma Dev, when we follow Bhishma Panchak, Bhishma Dev followed celibacy. He was a Naishtika Brahmachari for his entire lifetime, and he did not have sons. So that is why when we do Bhishma Panchak, we do Darpana to Bhishma Dev, that we has the sons and daughters of Bhishma Dev, we are performing that ritual. So we can see as to how the Lord, if we remember the Lord when we are in good health, the Lord protects us. And Bhishma Dev here sets a beautiful example of quitting the body. So these were some of the points that I could get from today's verse. So thank you so much for your patient hearing. Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Patit Pavan Guru Maharaj ki jai.
Yeah. Thank you, Radha Sugopika Mataji, for your wonderful class and sharing so many things. We can also remember that a devotee among non-devotees. how to balance this. Many times we got a question. So Bhishmadev, he was a Mahajan and a devotee, but he was among the non-devotees, the Kauravas. But still, he can able to perform his duty perfectly well, being the servant of the Lord. And you also have given an analogy of how we can able to remember Krishna at the time of quitting body. You gave many examples like Bhakti Charaswar Maharaj, even Jatayu, Haridas Thakur, they all remember the Lord. Then why not we? We can also do this. And the purport, I can remember, I can read one words. Therefore, the ardent desire of Bhishmadev was to see the person of Lord Krishna, the most lovable object. And by the grace of the Lord, Sri Bhishmadev had this opportunity at the last stage of his breathing. So somewhere I read, it is very simple. Prabhupada says that this Pranam Sankirtan method is very, very simple. And with this simple method, and one can go back to Godhead. Yeah, Mataji, you heard so many other lectures. You gathered a lot of information on these words. So wonderful to hear. And I thank you very much for this sharing. And we will keep it open for other devotees if they have any response. Hare Krishna.
ಹರೇ ಕೃಷ್ಣ ಮಾತಾಜಿ, ದಂಡವತ್ ಪ್ರಣಾಮ್. ಮಾತಾಜಿ, ಇವತ್ತಿನ ದಿನ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ತುಂಬ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಹೇಗೆ ನಾವು ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ಸಲ್ಲೂ ಕೃಷ್ಣನ ರಿಮೆಂಬರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ, ಇವಾಗ ಸಮ್ಮರ್ ಹಾಲಿಡೇಸ್ ಇದೆ, ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಭುಪಾದ ಹೇಗೆ ನಮಗೆ ಶೆಡ್ಯೂಲ್ಸ್ ಹಾಕ್ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ರೆ, ಈ ಲೀವಿನ್ ಈ ರಜಾ ಇರುವ ದಿನಗಳು ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಹೋಲಿ ಧಾಮಗಳಿಗೆ ಹೋಗುವಂತಹ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಸತ್ಸಂಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಗುರುಗಳು ಮತ್ತೆ ಸತ್ಸಂಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಶೆಡ್ಯೂಲ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನ ಹಾಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಯಾವಾಗ ನಾವು ರಜೆ ಇರಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ಕೆಲಸಗಳಿರಲಿ, ಹೇಗೆ ಇದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಕೃಷ್ಣನ ರಿಮೆಂಬರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ ಪ್ರಭುಪಾದರು ನಮಗೆ ಆದಿಯನ್ನು ಹಾಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ತುಂಬಾ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿತ್ತು ಮಾತಾಜಿ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಹರೇ ಕೃಷ್ಣ ಮಾತಾಜಿ, ಧನ್ಯವಾದ.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಪ್ರಭು. ಹರೇ ಕೃಷ್ಣ. ಧನ್ಯವಾದ.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandat Pranam. Thank you Mataji for the very wonderful class. Great examples you have put across that even if we are not able to remember Krishna, we can remember a devotee. Anyone, if we are able to remember about a devotee also, we'll be able to get through this this whole cycle. Thank you so much Mataji. Thank you.
Thank you Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Mataji, thank you for the wonderful class. One point I could take up is that Bhishma Dev, he was although looking like he was from opposite party, still we can understand that he is very great Mahajan of the Supreme Lord, devotee of the Lord, that Krishna himself came and gave darshan at the time of at the time of death. So can we understand this like we can engage in our prescribed duties and remember Krishna? And although it feels like it is not helping Krishna consciousness, can we think that we are in the right path if we can remember Krishna always?
So Mataji, it is even in the purport it is said that Krishna always told Arjuna to do his prescribed duty. So that doesn't mean that we keep our prescribed duty aside and in that way we can perform bhakti. Krishna never stops us from doing our prescribed duties. When we are doing our prescribed duties, in the same prescribed duty we can remember Krishna. So I was hearing in a lecture that Mataji was mentioning, suppose we go to job. So then how do we remember Krishna? Because we are engaged in performing our duties. So then Mataji told that whatever is the result that we get through our by performing the duty, that is when we are going to job or when we are going to office, and whatever is the result we are getting, we can engage that in the service of the Supreme Lord. So for example, I go to office and I earn my salary. So a portion of it can be given to the service of the Lord. So it doesn't mean that, I keep my prescribed duty aside and just keep performing my bhakti, or vice versa. So both has to be balanced. So is it right, Prabhu, if you can give your
Yes, you are
insight?
right. At the same time, also we need to keep ourselves away from the which are not recommended in the scriptures. Like my occupational duty is killing animals, and selling coffee, tea, or liquor. This is my occupational duty. I go and sell all this arak, alcohol, etc. That is not recommended. That's why Rupa Goswami says, Anukulyena Krishnanusilanam Bhaktiruttama. And also, and wantonly getting ourselves, engaged in working 14 hours, 18 hours. And that is not Anukula for Krishna consciousness. So we should remember that a job should be favorable for our Krishna consciousness. At the same time, we also, as you rightly said, offer the results, the service of Krishna. We get some payment. In the payment, a portion of the payment should go for his service, along with our body also. We should also, it's not that simply we are sending money as a donation and we feel very puffed up, oh, I am donating. Not like that. We need to also voluntary, manasa, vacha, kaya, we are supposed to serve the Lord. This body is also Lord's, So we need to engage this body. Body means all the senses into the service of the Lord. Okay, anybody else?
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you, Mataji, for the nice explanation.